Yeah, I'm going to quote somebody. Well, who am I quoting? Oh, Juan O Savin, quote, and all these things we're going to have to fight in this reset of America. The war in the financial realm is going to be the greatest of them all. A quote we clipped from last year from Juan. So we're going to be talking about some of that in just a moment. Before we talk about the bond collapse, Juan, the economic related information that I'm very anxious to get into with you, I'd like you to first comment, if you will, on the pixelated images, the recent comms coming straight from the White House, it seems, with the cell phones, the red folder, and so forth and so on. What is happening there? How would you want to break that down, decode that, or explain that to us?
Well, so many people want to say that there is no plan, nothing's happening, I don't see it, I don't understand it. And so, in large measure, this is about helping people understand that there is things occurring, but you can't give away every last aspect of it. And in lots of different categories, back when we had Gulf War One, Desert Storm, the way that the fight was described was full spectrum warfare. Okay. So, in other words, you saw planes and missiles and bombs and bullets and everything else, but that was only a tiny spectrum, slice of the light spectrum. And there's other stuff you get further off into the infrared or the ultraviolet, and it begins to become invisible to the naked eye. You have to have it aided. And so you're getting a little window into the world around President Trump and some of the things that are in play that give at least some comfort, understanding that the fight's on. There's things happening, and it's just like President Trump said the other day to Prime Minister there from Japan. You guys know a little about surprise, okay? People wanted to ridicule him for raising it that way, but the fact of the matter was, in warfare, deceptions are necessary, deflections, and you have to be willing to con the other guy so that you get the element of surprise. The context of that was about Iran. Why didn't the president advise people within the administration broadly, or Congress or other people about what he was about to do? Because they'd have said something, we would have lost the element of surprise. And we have people who've had to actually leave jobs in the intelligence agencies within the Pentagon and other places, and some people have been cut off from information within Congress as a result of leaks that occurred in the hours, days, weeks after we started this Iran campaign, because they immediately had to go tell their friends and try to leak stuff that would have compromised our security. So not letting that happen. That's the way it is.
Yeah, interesting. What I saw was, as I recall, anyway, some of the images were pixelated, if that's the word. Where I think it was Vance, Vice President Vance, had a cell phone, and it had the time marker at 9:10. Then I remember an image, a black image, with a sort of a digital script of the White House, with the progress bar that runs on the bottom of all the shows, halfway there. And then I see 9:10. Then we see the red folder. These are very interesting comms. I think that the what we're calling these days the target audience, or those that are newly looking around, I don't think they understand it at all. But it seemed like a message directly to the people that have been following, let's say, the Q drops and following things from a deeper perspective. Those are hat tips and comms to us, as I see it. I don't quite know what they all mean. It's interesting to connect it up, but I want to ask you, it's related, but kind of in the middle of everything that's going on, and nobody knows it better than our commander in chief, with all the issues on the table and everything that's on his docket every day. In the middle of all these things going on, he takes a trip to Graceland. Now, we all know he's a big Elvis fan, but I mean, there was some interesting comms within that. Do you care to speak about that before we jump into real red meat here?
Well, I don't. Actually, for the moment, I don't know if I want to say too much. I have some ideas
I
of what
understand.
was intended, and but you know what? As soon as I say something, then maybe other people wouldn't come in with their thoughts and ideas, and I don't think it's as fixed as some people would like us to believe. There's stuff that's intended to be open to interpretation, so that we stretch our minds, stretch the conversation. And, uh, you know, in fact, yeah, I'll hold.
We'll just
There's
leave
some
it at
stuff I
that.
do want to say, but I want to leave that for people to still yet speculate. By the way, I have a Buick 8 here. That's such a cool car. Mine's a convertible, very
That
rare,
is
but
quite the
that's a
car.
cool car. Yeah,
I feel like
that's kind
Al
of a fun
Capone's
one.
going to jump out with one of them machine guns, you know.
Well, in fact, that's some of the stuff they were showing in the imagery around the corner, and very fun stuff. And I was inside at the museum here, but it was too noisy, so we had to step out. But it's so fun inside. This is the Orlando Auto Museum, and just a great spot. If anybody's ever down here, you got kids. It's really designed around young people, but I'm a big kid. It's very fun. So,
You're a big
and by
kid
the
by
way,
the side
just
of the
let me
road.
yeah, yeah. Just don't get run over. Um, just an aside, in the context of all of these conversations that are going on right now,
Mhm.
uh, why am I here in Orlando? Well, I'm gonna go over to Titusville and watch the rocket launch. What rocket launch? Almost without most of the people within our community even realizing this. Wednesday, 6:25 p.m. We have a rocket scheduled for liftoff uh, to take a crew around the moon. First time since '72, last time we were supposedly there. And so that liftoff is going to happen, and that crew is going to go around the moon in preparation for Artemis 3, which is a moon landing. So Apollo 10 went around the moon, and then Apollo 11, once they had everything, it was a complete mock-up of Apollo 11 with everything in it, and then uh, Apollo 10 went around the moon and came back. They felt the systems were good enough to go to send back a manned team, and the intent is to go back to the moon, and this time to build a manned outpost that remains manned in perpetuity. And so that's, the objective. The only thing I'd add to it, um, you know, NASA running this using Elon's systems, never a straight answer. NASA, there's all sorts of questions that are out there floating regarding this whole thing. It's a very interesting conversation. And this is going to spur all sorts of discussion amongst the American people.
Oh yeah.
Um, and I have something that was conveyed to me before the first moon launch uh, or landing, and uh, that I've had ever since. And it was it's very, very interesting. And somewhere in here, I may very well disclose it publicly, but it goes to all this. So I watch all of this pretty closely, and uh, so I think everybody should take a little pause. It'll be all over the internet, but this is kind of think of how uh, America was sidetracked from so many of the things that, if you grew up in the late 50s, early 60s. The sense that we were going somewhere, we were going to do something amazing, uh, that existed then, and then it was derailed in the 70s and 80s and 90s. It was, and we haven't really recaptured that. In fact, if you look at the technological advancement curve, what we call the osmotic curve, we have not um, compounded our advancements. As much as you see the world change around you, we've not compounded them um, as we should have. And so here we are now, 50 years later, 55 years later, looking at going back to the moon. Something wrong there that we would have ever lost that technology. Even when you argue about, by the way, a very, very rare Kaiser. I've had a couple of them. And we have not advanced the way we were supposed to, no matter which way you look at it. And that's what Trump is trying to return, this setting up of tariffs for things coming into the country is designed to force the system to bootstrap itself together to return America to a manufacturing country, to build out our manufacturing base, our mining base, our raw resources, and provide the basics, including jobs, to the workforce that is otherwise not being utilized anywhere near full capacity, or utilized in jobs that are demeaning almost for people as they grow further into life. It takes the wind out of people to just try harder. So even the idea of returning to this mental golden age where we see these opportunities and the kids begin to want to capitalize on them again. Imagine what it was like for a kid like me, staying home from school and, feigning a cold or whatever you wanted to do so you could watch the next rocket launch, staying up all night while they were fueling and preparing for these rocket launches, all of the early Gemini missions and like that. I watched every last one of them, and then all the Apollo, and followed it extremely closely. It was so amazing. And I think that kind of a rebirth of interest and anticipation is part of the rebuilding and repairing of America that's needed.
Excellent. Well, it's interesting because you mentioned before, sure, this will be all over the news cycle and the internet for some time with all types of conversation. I'd be curious to see what Buzz Aldrin has to say about it, but we'll leave that alone at the moment. But I hear what you're saying really on a patriotic level as well. I was a child, of course, and I mentioned to you off air, my father worked for CBS at the time, not in news, but as a radio technician, and went to all the Apollo launches to do whatever his task was at the time. And so, I remember what a big event it was. Let's have that again, except this time, let's go there. Ha, ha, ha. Okay, I'd like to ask you, Juan. I'd like to ask you about April 2nd, Liberation Day. Our Commander-in-Chief and great President Donald J. Trump is talking about. What does that mean to you, Juan? Liberation Day. What do you think's going on April 2nd? What is that announcement communicating to us?
Well, again, what you have to kind of think about is that we as a nation have been hijacked in so many ways and tied down like Gulliver to so many things. I just had a private conference, invitational, and they invited a lot of the experts and hosted them at the Ahern Hotel in Las Vegas last week. And we were looking at the bond market and what's developing as far as a crisis within the bond market. It's a very, very, very serious situation. That crisis is so extreme that as it currently sits, several of the experts agreed that on the low side, the threat to the world economy, not just the American economy, was on the low side, somewhere between 60 and 80 times as bad, just crunching the numbers, as
Mm-hmm.
the crisis in the financial markets that caused the 2008 crisis. And if you remember,
Wow.
President Bush came out after some speed trading that happened the night before and activity over the Federal Reserve, et cetera, presidential authorities. Um, he came out and said that had he not acted, had the federal government not acted, within 24 hours, the world's financial markets would have collapsed and would not be able to have been brought back online. That's how serious it was. That they were looking at a
Yep.
complete implosion, okay, within
Mm-hmm.
24 hours. So they had to
Mm-hmm.
step in, authorize a whole bunch of money to be sent everywhere. There's all sorts of questions. Who got it? What was the criteria for sending it? Did any of it ever get paid back? Blah, blah, blah. And
Yeah.
which friends and buddies got it. But now we look at the current bond crisis. It's on the low side, 60 times greater. Most guys settled on somewhere between 80 and 100 times greater, depending on which math and numbers you wanted to start with. Um, in this situation, the window for action might very well be 15 minutes, not 24 hours. And it could be triggered by activities in distant places across the globe and then have severe consequences out into every person in this audience's life, wherever you are in the world. Um, you're really talking about a type of collapse that's like dominoes. It all comes down, the whole house of cards comes down. Now, this isn't an accident. When it happened under Bush, anybody that says that they had no idea this was coming is lying on their face. They had a very good idea what was coming and how it was going to happen and when and where. And so they waited till the last second and then dove in and acted like it was the last second to take care of friends, buddies, other stuff. Anybody within the right locations that pretends they don't know what's coming in the bond market, that's also a falsehood with this current situation. Um, the only question is at what point, what date triggers this? And when it goes down, you know, who all gets wiped out in the wipeout? Okay. Will you be forewarned enough to maybe get a little bit out of the way? Will you be, is there even an option available to you? This is the kind of thing, it's an extinction level event within the financial markets. Think of it as bad as 2008 was, and remember the ramifications: real estate, jobs, of banking, loans, etc. And this is on the low side, 60, 80 times worse, and on the high side, much, much more. Because see, we don't even have all the figures. If you go through and look at the rest of the figures, we're talking about something where currently the numbers we're working with are very incomplete. As more and more data comes in, it may be 200 or 300 times worse than what happened in 2008, and it happens almost instantaneously. Why hasn't somebody done something to prepare and get out of the way of this? Because they aren't afraid it's going to happen. They're praying it happens. The only question is who owns the moment of the collapse. It's like musical chairs. If you got a buddy that's handling the record player, knows when you're close to the chair, he can stop the music when you have the best opportunity to get a seat. So with that in mind, are we getting set up to take care of somebody's friends and buddies, but not you're not one of them. That's what it is. So kids coming out to enjoy the cars and all that. So
Quite nice. This is staggering. 80 to 100 times, perhaps 200 to 300 on the upside, or 60 to 80 on the low side. Heck, even if it was the same as 08, 09 with Bush and Hank Paulson, that's a disaster. This is cataclysmic. Can it be averted?
no, that's the starting
Can
point.
it be
Everybody
diminished?
needs to understand. Uh, it there is no stopping what's coming. The way I describe it, it's like a tsunami. Um, an earthquake has already occurred, and now
Mhm.
one of my favorite body styles here. I've
Mhm.
had a couple of these, fantastic. I don't have one now. Um, uh, there is no stopping the tsunami wave. It's so broad, so deep, it's moving so fast, but it's still out at sea. And
Mhm.
uh, it's, in Hawaii, there was a quake happened in 56, I think it was off the coast of Chile, and it caused a tsunami. And the tsunami went around the world from the southern to the, north of the equator there, all the way to Hawaii. The travel time was moving at about 300 knots. So it took a very long time from the earthquake for that wave. Just think of an airliner moving at 400 or 500 knots, about the time of an airline
Mhm.
flight across from Chile to Hawaii. And the wave out at sea was only, probably 8, 10 inches foot tall at the most. If you were a ship out there, you might not have even, felt it other than a little, bump. But when a tsunami wave reaches the shallower water approaching the land, the wave trades speed for height and it slows down. And so what happened was, as it was slowing down and gaining height, it was sucking the water back in towards the wave from the areas around it, because this wave's climbing high. It's just like pulling the water towards it. So in this little cove in Hawaii, people were, there fishing, doing whatever, taking a walk. And suddenly they saw that the water went way out. It was a low, low tide. They'd never
Mhm.
seen a tide so low. So they all went down, and there was fish flopping. There was, octopus. There was sharks, all sorts of things. And they uh, began to, gather these things up. It was a great party. Everybody's laughing, having a great time. And then the wave from the tsunami got to them, and it was a perfect hit straight up the gut of this little cove. And it killed hundreds of people. And it caught them all by surprise. They didn't understand the situation. Nobody was there to warn them that there's this tsunami wave coming. And so they just partied on. And many, many died. The wave went up, I think, a mile inland up this kind of this little river valley, which was there, and killed hundreds of people and wiped out everything in its path. This bond crisis, which is primarily uh, the the working figures, about 84% of the bonds that are out there that are at the core of this crisis are school bonds, and where they have, they are bonds issued to build school buildings and do all sorts of stuff, and the taxpayers, the property taxpayers, pay for all those facilities and everything else. Well, at the end of the day, 84% of the government bonds that are out there here in the U.S. right now are these school bonds, and they really don't have substance behind them in the way that most people think. They're supposed to be for buildings and all sorts of things. They've been spending the money in crazy ways. Lots of payoffs going on, payoffs to insurance, reinsurance companies, and all sorts of rackets. I mean, just literally rackets, and rated higher than they're supposed to be through some of these rackets. The what happened after 2008 is that the banks were considered to be possibly weak because of the way they held their cash assets. And so they were forced to hold 60% or more of their assets in government issued bonds. So they have purchased these bonds, then they're allowed to go back to the Federal Reserve and monetize these bonds and get cash for them. Even hypothecated cash in advance for some of the interest returns and things like that that are anticipated to come in the future. So, as one of the speakers who's gone through all of this and is in Supreme Court in Texas on a number of these matters said, to his way of looking at it, he sees that there's 600 banks that will be completely wiped out as this bond tsunami hits. And it doesn't end there because they have their agreements into the Federal Reserve System through larger banks, and they have their agreements through the main, half dozen banks. So all of them get hit, and it's a very traumatic thing. The markets get hit, real estate values get hit, and so you're looking at some kind of a perfect storm into the financial community. The 401ks, the investments in the stock markets, all sorts of things get hit very, very, very severely. And it can happen on a trigger very quickly. The rate of the explosive activity in the bond market, instead of being 24 hours, could literally be minutes once it's triggered. And so then part of the question becomes, what triggers it or who triggers it? My belief personally, and we'll just have to watch and see how it plays out, could be wrong. It's my belief that the intent by these globalistas, these banker communities, is that they want to collapse it on their timing, and the timing is going to be based on when we start to go in and do arrests related to the election fraud stuff, and or moving into the trial phase. And there's some dancing going on concerning the exact timing. If they pick the timing, we're caught flat-footed. They could do it at any time that stopping something that Trump wants to do, just like the Iran thing and other things. There's a banking component in there. And by the way, if you remember when 2008 happened, in the year prior to that, really specifically 8 months, 9 months prior to that, fuel prices had gone up significantly and really hit business, air travel. People had to suddenly, soccer moms couldn't take their kids to soccer except they had to pool. It became wildly expensive to get gas. We're in a similar situation where the expenses for related to fuel usage in factories and people getting to work and all that have gone up wildly since the Iran push started. A lot of people have questioned the wisdom of what President Trump did in attacking the situation in Iran. Let me just answer that real quick, and I'll hand it back to you there. But the issue is this. We have all these looming monsters, very, very serious monsters that have been kind of set up. The dominoes have been set in place to have a crisis, a disaster on command. that we would have to adjust to. What President Trump and the people who got him into office in the first place are doing, in my opinion, is they're eliminating these sneaky things, these bombs that have been placed to pull America's attention away from its own internal situation on command. Again, going after the elections and going after the economy. President Trump wants to be remembered. His objective is to be remembered as the president that returned honest elections, not just to America, but to the world, without the fraud. Remember, we have the people testifying before grand juries this moment across several states where they have testified concerning the 2020 election and 2022 and 2024 that they had flipped the elections in 71 countries plus the United States, not just at the highest leadership level, but down through the ranks. And so President Trump's goal is to return honest elections. And on the way to honest elections, you're going to have to place some people in jail. If you don't have consequences that real price has to be paid by people that were involved in this, then there's no deterrent out into the future. And the people that were manipulating these elections, you must remember, COVID was a component in this worldwide attempt to take over government across the world through the elections. COVID was aimed at the elections. That's why you had the drop boxes. That's why you had all the money coming in trying to manipulate that. So it was a component in this dishonest election cycle. And as time goes on, that will become more and more unarguable. People want to argue about that now, whatever. The data, the information will come out, the testimonies coming out of how intricately it was tied to that. The other thing that President Trump wants to be remembered for when his time in office now is done is returning honest money, not just to America, but to the world. And so honest weights and measures. God in the scriptures says, I hate dishonest weights and measures. Well, a fraudulent vote, people putting their finger on the scale, and fraudulent money, people putting stuff out at one value when it's nowhere close to that in real value, whether it's paper fiat or digital fiat. President Trump intends to return honest elections to the American people and to the world. We have to deal with our own, but we're going out and help everybody across the world that's had these frauds perpetrated upon them, so that they can be strong allies, honest allies, and not in this crippled state. And then honest money, so we can do honest trade, fair deals, and help the world that way. So those are the two main pillars. And within the context of those two pillars, he's called for a national day of prayer and recommitment of the nation to God, May 17th. He's asked everybody to show up at the National Mall and kind of in a Pilgrim's Progress type of a way, rededicate ourselves to, this, to God's purposes and ask for divine assistance, favor, protection, blessing moving forward. Now, why is that so important? Because God does govern in the affairs of men. That's what you see with many nations involved, out through the scriptures, and those that defied God didn't survive. And so he's doing that. And it's not just about May 17th. Why did he choose that exact day? It's a Sunday. Because it's 49 days, including the beginning and end date, to the 4th of July. And 7 times 7. That's his number is 7. He was 70 years old, 7 months and 7 days on planet Earth on his first full day in office. Not the day he was inaugurated in 2017, because that's only a half day, and you're doing all the parties and all that. He showed up in the office on January 21st, 2017, 7 o'clock in the morning to get to work. 70 years old, 7 months, 7 days old on this planet. The 49 days for May 17th is 7 times 7, and within a Jewish calendar, um, uh, that's the Jubilee year. Every week of years, 6 years, you would plow and plant and do everything. In the 7th year, you would allow the land to go fallow and rest. And just like God, 6 days he created the world, the 7th day he rested. It's for our rest, not his. And for us to recollect ourselves. Every week of years, uh, uh, 7 year periods, uh, you have the year of rest in the 7th year, the 49th year, and then you add to that a second year, the 50th year, and that's called the Jubilee year. And in the Jubilee year, um, anybody that sold property, anybody that did certain transactions, they had to return that property to the original family. So you never really bought property from another family. You leased it up until the 50th year, and then you had to return it back. That was the Jubilee year. And so property prices had a cap on them. How much could you produce? And so if you sold a property with 45 years left before the next Jubilee, you got a high price for it. If you sold a property with 5 years or 1 year to the next Jubilee, you got a very tiny price on it, because how much could you make on that property in that short period of time? And then it would be returned to the family. And so in this Jubilee sense, I believe part of what Trump is trying to convey to the American people is that we're about to enter a Jubilee period where we're going to get back things that were siphoned away, stolen, frauded from the American people. We're going to take all of that back and return it to the American people. That's the theme that President Trump is working within. And so this is our 5th Jubilee year, if you will, 250 years since the signing of the Constitution. And in that period from July 5th forward, I believe the president intends to begin that Jubilee return to the American people, constitutional money, honest elections, and take some of these fraudsters out of public office and out of the public arena, so that we can have a rest and move on and get on with life in a, the American dream, if you will. And even with the rocket launch here in just a few hours now, 2 days from here, but by the time this show is on the air, it should be happening about that time. Unless there's delays, weather, and things like that, which could very well happen. We are beginning to re-engage. The intent is next year to send a crewed ship to the moon, land on the moon, very Apollo-esque, and then build out that habitation there and begin to jumpstart the youth with opportunities and the sense of opportunity, and rebuilding and recapturing a dream that was set aside, dampened, destroyed many years ago.
Thank you, Juan. I've got pages of notes, but I'll be very brief on my follow-up. I want to I'm going to summarize something, and then you comment on it. It seems to me, with the bond, going back to the analogy of the tsunami and how long it takes, and then all of a sudden, boom, there it is. We have that issue going on, the collapse of everything via the bonds. We have, as you stated, the president restoring constitutional money, and restoring free and fair elections, first here at home and then throughout the world. So it would seem to me, with trigger dates such as April 2nd, May 17th, as you just spoke about, and certainly July 4th, that and I know we don't deal with dates, we deal with events, but it would seem to me the event of the bond disaster that you've laid out that's coming, that's not stoppable. Would it be a fair statement to say that that event would be within the time frame of April to June?
No, I don't believe the actual bond event. My personal gut instinct is that it really doesn't hit till sometime next year.
Okay.
And doesn't mean that we don't have early rumblings. We do have some early rumblings already, things that have happened even in the last few days that are very shocking. So with that in mind, nobody's skating clear of this stuff. But there is things you can do to kind of get out of the way. What's going to happen? The question is the paper money, the transition over to Treasury, things that are in play. And so the reason why there's so much manipulation into the metals markets right now is because there's so much paper, um, uh, paper silver, paper gold that's been foisted out there. So it's the real thing within the trading community that they're trying to wash out those paper commitments as best as they can, and it's manipulating values. Anybody that sold silver in the last few weeks probably made a huge mistake and bought into the bullshit. Just hang tight, let it go where it's going. In fact, I have somebody that took a pretty significant quantity of silver and went to an Asian location from where they were at to sell physical silver because they could buy it at this paper value price and sell it at the market price for physical silver. Enough so that they were able to charter an aircraft and afford to do it to go do the transaction. And they got the spread between the paper value and the physical value. They had bought a large quantity from a country that had this. So with that in mind, they did something that was very rapid. What did they do? They went right back and bought more. And they're going to try and do a couple different transactions. In Asia, they don't have enough silver to cover all of these positions. In fact, in Australia the other day, I have somebody that's there in Australia that's doing filming on a movie, very interesting movie. And they had a line around the block of several days last week, people waiting to get in to buy physical silver at a number much higher. I think it was $11 higher than what the paper value shows on, say the U.S. exchanges and like that. And same thing in other countries in Asia. It's not reflecting the reality of what getting physical silver involves. And that was not even coined silver. That was silver bars, which don't go for as much. So, hang tight. Drama's ahead. So, aren't those
Thank you,
fins
Juan.
beautiful? I just love these fins on these cars, man. I'm a sucker for cars with fins.
Nice car. I'm not that well schooled, but is that a Chevy? Is that what that is?
Oh no,
Chevrolet?
no, no. This is a Chrysler.
Okay.
I've had a couple of these. I've had a couple of the Plymouths, and the DeSoto is my favorite. That's my favorite. But DeSoto convertible, and I've come close to buying another one a couple times and haven't pulled the trigger. They're going out of sight on the price, but it's very fun.
I'll tell you, if I'm going to get into a car accident, I'd rather it be in that vehicle than the ones they're building today. But let me ask you, Juan, about back to the bonds. you spoke about the school bonds and so forth. That, as I would understand, comes under the category of munis or municipal bonds. Will this bond collapse also occur, and if so, to what extent, in corporate bonds? And then I have a question about the treasury bonds in a moment.
Well, the problem is they're all interconnected, and if faith in one bond market collapses, faith in others of them also happen. And, for example, in the municipal bonds, they're usually might be a water district, might be an electrical district, or, they've got a stadium or something like that. These things generate some funds, some cash. In the case of school bonds, it's a property tax. And then, for example, I'll just use Colorado as an example. They've done these wild things in the school bonds in Colorado. There's even a connection to the governor back to, 20 years ago with things that were going on and some of his role in government at that time. And so in Colorado, in the last year, the property taxes have gone up 40% in 1 year. Now, the reason is because they've had to roll over some bonds because they weren't even servicing the interest on the bonds. So they do these compound interest bonds. They're not even paying the principal. They're just paying interest on the interest that's unpaid. If you have it go up 30% 1 year, 40% another year, 20% the next year, how many years can you have these kinds of jumps occur before the people can't afford to pay the property taxes? And what do? They do a tax lien sale, and they sell your house. People can't think of it this way. Excuse me. Did anybody on the whole inside of Colorado, did the average income of people living in Colorado go up 40% while their property taxes went up 40%? No. Did their income even go up 10%? Because the property taxes are a portion of what they pay in their overall bills and mortgages and all that. No. Their income was flat to negative slightly. So these taxes went up radically, and they had no new income to do it. People say, oh, well, the property's going up in value and we're going to get more for it. And so it's offset by rising prices, which, by the way, is the product of inflation with money creation. So people had to dig deeper in their pocket, which means they didn't put it in their savings. They didn't spend it on their kids. They didn't do other stuff. They just serviced the interest on the interest. Next door and down the street in Oklahoma went up 30%. Colorado is not a unique situation. We're seeing it all across the country. And part of the racket that's been going on is that the districts involved, the counties, etc., they've been raising the assessed values of houses beyond what they should have been raised artificially. So that if they say, well, we need this much to service these bonds, we're going to have property values at this price. So maybe they, just for the sake of discussion, they raise your value of your house from 450,000 to 500,000. Was there that much more demand to purchase houses at the higher price? Well, if the people working in the area didn't get a raise, then no, the support of those higher prices isn't there amongst the property owners, the workers in the area. It was artificially inflated. They're just doing it to hit the numbers, and so they're raising taxes on the property owners without it being a fair raise. It was just done arbitrarily to service their taxes. And if you're not a property owner, you rent, or you work someplace and they have a building like that, even if they rent or lease, these prices are raised by the owners of the property because they have to pay the tax, and you pay it indirectly. In fact, in a cup of Starbucks in this same area of Oklahoma where they were looking at it, they found there was 9 different ways that the cup of coffee was raised in price tied to property taxes. And in the cup of coffee, it was about 25% of the total cost of the cup of coffee. So just in property taxes, well, if you raise that 40%, the cup of coffee goes up. All of a sudden, there's a breaking point where people say, you know what, I'll have to make it at home, or I'll have to, decide I don't drink coffee anymore. There's a break point. And as these things come on hard and strong, all of a sudden, there is a straw that breaks the camel's back. And the question is, who puts that straw load on the people, that suddenly makes it just, you can't do it anymore. It's coming. And that's the question. Do they pick it, this deep state component, or do we pick it sooner? That's the real question.
Wow, interesting. The F word comes to mind here. And of course, I'm talking about the word fraud. That brings me to Scott Bessent, who's going across the mainstream news platforms today with an all hands on deck. It's a brand new program paying whistleblowers big money to expose the scams and fraudsters stealing from the American taxpayers. That is noteworthy. And your chief of staff sent me this morning. I was it's just morning here and I haven't had a chance to read it. I'm trying to pull it up. It's where is it? Here it is. It's the Bondgate summary. We have everything you've laid out. We've got Scott Bessent looking at fraud. We've got this Bondgate document. President Trump has talked about peripherally at least, no more property tax. Now, obviously, you can't stop that overnight, but it's in this global financial reset, we're resetting a lot of things.
It may be necessary, by the way. That may be the only way out of the problem. Well, because
elaborate
the
on
property tax,
how and when.
The property tax, as it's being levied, is being levied unlawfully and via fraud into the bond market. And so in looking at this, there's no regional solution that keeps us from the tsunami just wiping everybody out. What a couple of the presenters have come up with is the only way they see to avert or deal with this crisis, to head it off, is to declare a moratorium on property taxes, to stop all property taxes, and then state by state, under a federal mandate, to order a increase to any state sales taxes to address especially the interest early on. So you would have, say, a 3 to 5 year super hike in sales taxes of varying state by state from somewhere between about 10% to 20% increase in sales tax. When that happens, you take all of that sales tax revenue and apply it to the interest on the existing bonds and reduce the interest load radically to begin with. And then you lighten up and start paying off the principal, but you've got to hit that interest. And remember, the people that were caught with these things, they are, widows and orphans, much of them. There's some of them that will be wiped out in what happens, and there's nothing that they can do about it. So the intent is to try and take the edge off. I don't believe that those numbers are doable. The people involved, yeah, we could do it. I don't think so. You would end up stopping It's such a penalty on shopping, purchasing, doing stuff. You just make the underground economy that much stronger to not do it and pay the tax, and or to renew facilities, purchases, things like that. What Trump does intend to do is to create the mechanism to stop all property taxes along with the federal income tax. But then he's going to take some of the money that he intends to put into a sovereign wealth fund for the country, including sovereign wealth funds for other countries where they've had stuff stolen from them, and take a significant percentage of that and apply it to these pay down these bonds related to the property taxes, and then moderate the total number due. Won't eliminate it completely, but it'll reduce it down to a manageable level. And some states are far more egregious in what they've done than others. So Montana wasn't quite as bad, and in their calculations would have to have, a 10% increase in sales taxes in the way they currently would want to do it. California might be 18 to 20. Washington state would be similar or even a little bit more. And both states already have a very high sales tax, just under 10%. So you'd be up almost, at least 25%, maybe almost 30%. The markets won't support that. So there's got to be some way to moderate it. You're going to have a lot of bankruptcies involved, and it's going to be gruesome. So, it's a rough ride ahead. And if they're going to dilute the value of the currency by printing a whole bunch of it over at the Federal Reserve, then the way you have to get away from that is you got to go to move away from the paper or digital. People that think they're safe in the cryptos, is a digital fiat safer than a paper fiat? Seriously? At least with the paper, you have a speed limit with the cost of paper and ink, even if you're putting a whole bunch of zeros across it. So I don't believe that's true. I think you're in serious trouble. So, it doesn't take, you don't have to be some super genius to see these problems. A wise man sees trouble and gets out of the way.
Thank you. To my producer, do we have that image, the press release, I believe, from the Treasury, or there it is. I'm going to read a bit of this for the benefit of our audience that may not have come across it. It's a perfect dovetail into what you were just talking about in terms of the fiat. So here it is, straight from the Treasury, I believe. Washington, in honor of the 250th anniversary of the United States of America, President Donald J. Trump's signature will appear on future U.S. paper currency along with the Secretary of the Treasury, marking the first time in history for a sitting president. I am going to continue to read. It's brief, but it's important. Under President Trump's leadership, we are on a path toward unprecedented economic growth, lasting dollar dominance, and fiscal strength and stability, quoting Scott Bessent. He says, there is no more powerful way to recognize the historic achievements of our great country and our President Donald J. Trump and the U.S. dollar bills bearing his name, and it is only appropriate at this that this historic currency be issued at the coming up of the 250th. So as the 250th anniversary, as we conclude this press release, of our great nation approaches, American currency will continue to stand as a symbol of prosperity, strength, and unshakable spirit of the American people under President Trump's leadership. The president's mark on the history as the architect of America's golden age economic revival is undeniable. Printing his signature on the American currency is not only appropriate, but also well-deserved. The dollar's at about 100 on the dollar index, which is spiked up from a fall of 96. There's all kinds of conversations I'm sure you can have with us, Juan, but summarize it. What's happening to the U.S. dollar in the battle for currency supremacy? Look, the Federal Reserve and the IRS is going away as we know it. And we've got a lot of things at play here. Help us out with concern of the dollar's demise and then rebirth through a treasury-backed currency as the death of the Federal Reserve notes dollar goes into the dustbin of history. Can you frame that up a little bit for us? We've lost Juan's audio. We've got no audio on you, Juan. I don't know if my producer can. All right, he's got some tech. Juan, we do not hear you. I think you hear me probably, and you're sorting that out. But folks, if you back up while we're waiting for Juan to resurface, if you back up and listen to this broadcast, there's a lot of dialogue laid out by Juan, and there's a lot of very important signals in there. Very important places that we should be focusing our attention. And I sure hope we can get Juan back, because I have some, I'd like him to comment on what I've just spoken about, and that's the US dollar. And then I'd like Juan to comment on his view. It's very clear. We have a big problem in the bond market, 60 to 80 times on the low side, worse than 09. Whew. Okay. So, I hope we get Juan back in to weigh on the U.S. dollar and to weigh in also, because he started to talk about the real estate debacle. It sounds to me like the real estate mess, maybe not as bad as the bond mess, but it can't be a good picture. I'd like Juan to talk about that. And there he is. Juan's back.
Yeah,
Can you hear me, Juan?
I had a call that came in. I tried to, StreamYard doesn't let me block calls, so I apologize.
Understood. I was reading the Treasury note on the dollar, the U.S. dollar. Can you? It's up to 100 on the index. We know the game that's being played. We know the Federal Reserve note's going to go away, replaced by a Treasury dollar, and we can see the beginning of that from that press release from the Treasury itself. Frame this up for us, because it's a big story. The U.S. dollar itself. Will it hit zero? Will it go down? Will it be rescued with a Treasury note? How does that play out? Time frames, etc.
Well, hold on a second. A Federal Reserve note is not a Treasury note. A Federal Reserve note is a Federal Reserve note. That is a private banking organization. It is an international banking organization with their roots over there in the city of London. And in fact, that's been the fight all the way along with Trump. Remember this, the dossier that FBI agent Stroke and FBI agent Page went and was picked up in the city of London, not in London proper, the city of London, which is the old Roman city. The 1 square mile has a brick wall around it even today. And that city runs itself autonomously in many ways to the rest of the country and the world. It's like Washington, D.C. It's a entity unto itself. This federal city of Washington, D.C. Is isolated from the 50 states. And so that city of London is just to give you a scale of how powerful that group is in the city of London. When the Queen was alive, every year of her life as Queen, she had to go to the gates of the city of London, at the center of London, the old Roman city, take off her shoes and walk through the gate into the city of London, curtsy, bow, kiss the ring of the mayor of the city of London. Here she is, this all-powerful position, the Commonwealth, all the ownership of property, everything else, all the pomp and circumstance, and she has to grovel to the mayor of the city of London. Who's running this operation? And that's where the dossier came from. That's where your Federal Reserve is anchored into. It's not even the U.S. Federal Reserve, okay? It's this global banking cartel. What is Trump doing? When we had the 250th anniversary of the Army, after which Trump went back to the White House, had 2 flags put on the front lawn of the White House. And it was like Mount Suribachi in World War II, raising the flag, taking control of the situation. And then he had security fencing put around the White House. Ooh, people are going to go after the White House. Trump's afraid that the people are going to come take back the White House from Trump. No, it was symbolic. And then Trump had security fencing put up at the same time around the Treasury. It was symbolic. They weren't expecting anybody to come roaring over the fence. It was symbolic. He didn't put it around the Supreme Court. He didn't put it around Congress. He didn't put it around the Federal Reserve, because he was sending a message. I'm going to protect the constitutional dollar and the presidency, the commander-in-chief position, against all takers here in the swamp. Fenced off the swamp, kept the alligators outside the White House and outside of Treasury. And that's where we're at right now. We're going to protect the Treasury and its constitutional dollar versus the Federal Reserve dollar, which is no more federal than Federal Express. In fact, even the Board of Governors for the Federal Reserve had a building in Washington, D.C., the Board of Governors building. It was closed down permanently. Go look on their website, go find it. And that's the Federal Reserve, where the governors of the Federal Reserve, the member banks, would meet to set monetary policy and all that. Trump said, go find someplace else to meet. We're not giving you federal access, federal authority any longer. So fight's on. And by the way, in my book, I talk about this fight with the, where the Titanic went down and took out the people that were against the creation of this Federal Reserve banking system for monetary policy, and they died there. And then in 1913, you were able to have this fraudulent vote to bring on the Federal Reserve System and the IRS at the same time to service the interest on the money loaned. So, it's worth going back and take a read at that.
Yeah, absolutely. With all the information that we're all learning about, the Federal Reserve moves against it, the IRS moves against it, the issuing of Trump's signature on paper currency, the battle of the Treasury dollar note coming and the Federal Reserve note dollar ending. That is a gargantuan battle, as you well know. Again, I know we don't do dates, but there's your event. But can we put a time frame on when that shift actually takes place? Is this a July announcement, or is this 2027, 2028? Because it's coming.
I don't think we're in a position where it comes as soon as many people would like to say. And if you were looking at it from a globalista standpoint, had they gotten Hillary in, had they gotten Kamala in, probably you're looking at something maybe 2030 or beyond. Some of the experts are saying, it would have been about 2028. All I can say there, from my perspective, and everybody has to take this with a big, huge grain of salt, okay? Because Trump is not, he goes out of his way, he goes to great pains to make sure everybody knows that nobody else is going to control him on this stuff. He had a group of young kids that were, at a military event. And he asked them, he says, how many people do you think know what I'm about to say on that stage? And some are speculating a half a dozen, 30, whatever. And he says, no, one. Nobody knows what I'm going to say precisely on that stage except for me. And
Mm-hmm.
he wanted that calm out there because he will do stuff without telegraphing stuff completely, just like he went into Iran. Virtually nobody
Mm-hmm.
knew that he was about to do that. Even the generals involved, even though they'd been asked to prepare and all that, they thought it might be weeks out or something. And when he finally says, "Nope, we're going, let's get it done," yeah, virtually nobody had a clue that he was going to act on the timing he did. To protect the surprise, the secrecy, and to save lives. The markets are already in a primed position. You could blow that from any different side on command, from a number of different directions. Uh, it could be softer now, but it's still going to be harsh. It can be harder at a later time, but and more complete. It's just hard to say. The key thing is, I believe Trump wants to own the timing and not wait for these globalista, Club of Rome, World Economic Forum, Atlantic Council, Council on Foreign Relations, Davos crowd, the 13 royal families, the Rothschild or Rockefeller crowd, to pick the moment. He wants to pick the moment that favors us the most. It's not going to not happen, but we can kind of control. It's the difference between an avalanche that happens, you know, from something triggering it out there, or an avalanche where we fire the can and hit the spot where we know it's the weak spot and cause it to occur on command, so that it doesn't have the element of surprise, and we know that we've cleared as many, you know, out of the way as possible. We know the kind of the route that we have to be worried about. And with that in mind, somebody saying they know exactly, or they've, you know, intuited the exact moment that Trump's most likely to do it. Well, maybe they have, maybe they haven't. I don't think Trump's conveying that precisely, and they're still getting their ducks in a row. Even with Secretary Bessent, by the way, get everything ready. Nobody does a thing till I say, and that's what he's preserving. With that said, the other thing that would affect it, and everybody should be thinking in these terms, we think of Trump's time in office until the next election and the handoff of power. Remember this: President Trump had all the generals assembled there in Virginia, with the exception of only a very tiny number. And then he told all of those assembled generals, I am 20 or 45, 46, although I don't want to take credit for it. That's exactly what he said. And 47. You have to think of the rarefied air of the men in that room, our military in the room, and guys were giving each other a side glance, and they were like rolling their eyes in their head. What in the world did he just say? Why did he say that? He's 46? Are you kidding me? Oh, but in a continuity in government situation, blah, 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 we'd all have to know. Really? You think you do? Trump, there's other things afoot here that are very much so not understood out into the electorate, where there's a dance taking place. We are not, by the way, in a devolution moment. Devolution is a very specific legal term, and this is not devolution. But it is a controlled situation to protect the American people and people across the world, by the way. And the thing that's coming, which is the trigger event probably before the bonds, is the arrests related to the election fraud.
Yeah.
Some of the arrests related to the Russia fraud and the damage to President Trump's first term. As those people are taken into custody, most of them for prosecution in military tribunals for treason, for traitorous activities in aid of foreign governments. Many will go through the regular justice system, but not the majority. And in that moment, the attempt to protect by taking the economy off the rails, by hijacking stability of the American economy, these globalists, these globalista, may very well try to pull some trigger that would take us off point. And I believe that what President Trump has done in several locations, if you look at the last year plus, he has methodically, under the advice of the generals who invited him to run for office, the 200, this has been gamed out extensively. This is not as haphazard as it might look. It's not as date-driven, although that's a component, as it is checkpoints. And you have to get through this checkpoint to do this other thing. And there's some fluidity on the dates. There's very little fluidity on the checkpoints that have to be crossed before you go to the next action. You have to bring the American public along. You have to have consensus amongst the people for the things that you're about to do. So with that in mind, President Trump is operating with a roadmap, but not necessarily precisely a schedule. In some ways, we're ahead of schedule, and then we pause. Iran, for example, when the president says we're ahead of schedule in Iran, okay, well, that just means that we have a bit of a zone to cross the T's and dot the I's better and give attention to other things. It's just like the rocket launch that I'll be watching on Wednesday when your show's coming out. This one we're doing right now. You could have a weather hold for lightning, rain, winds, because it could push pressure on the vehicles that's coming out of the lower atmosphere where the winds are more significant. You could have that cause stresses that they don't want. You could have a hold due to an electrical system, fuel system, computers, any number of things that you'd have to scrub the launch or delay it. I think they have a 2-hour window from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. East Coast time to do that launch that day, and then they have to go to the next day. And then after so many days, the location of the moon in relation to the Earth moves to a place that it doesn't work for a launch, and so they'd have to wait till the end of the month. So there's all sorts of things that could happen on a hold, and it's the same thing with what President Trump is doing. Any number of things could come in, so they have options for next moves, and that includes for accelerating the next moves. But I don't believe on a global scale that either side is ready to pull the pin too soon. And the only other thing I want to add for everybody to kind of understand where Trump is at mentally, COVID was aimed at the world to capture the elections across the world. COVID wasn't about the disease. It was about yarning in the entire population of the planet to these crooked election systems and to mail-in votes, and then to vote on your phone where they control all the electronics. You'd have never had another honest vote forever. They'd have taken it over. You'd be slaves forever. So what was it that interrupted the flow on this whole COVID thing? See, the intent was whether Hillary won or not, um, in this COVID period, was that they were going to shut down the world, masks, communications, interactions, etc., churches, whatever you want to do, the stores, damage the economy. And then they floated out there that you were going to get a chance to have a normal life when they had a vaccine that you could get that would allow that people could begin to interact safely again. Now we know that the vaccine was already completed by DARPA, was sitting in Department of Defense labs all the way back 2015 and probably earlier. It's just SARS. It's just SARS-1, SARS-2. This is the SARS-2 variant. And by the way, they had the Event 201 in China, Gates and Kissinger and all the usual suspects there present in the fall of 2019, preparing for this and gaming it out, practice run for the real event to make sure everybody was on deck and they knew what they're doing. So this was a very deep plan. And ultimately, the target wasn't the shutdown that you thought it was for medical and all that. It was about elections. And that will come out. And anybody doesn't believe it, just relax. You'll get plenty of information that'll back up what I'm saying as time goes on here in the testimonies. But what Trump did to thwart that screwed them up completely, was he issued the warp speed directive to come up with the vaccine. Well, the vaccine already existed, but he forced the issue to come up with the vaccine. And what happened was the vaccine came out earlier than they planned. And then in doing that, they weren't able to control the population the way they anticipated. People began to realize the con. They understood the falsity of this whole scenario, and their plans started to come off the rails in unexpected ways. I'm telling you, this audience, the intent, in my opinion, has always been to bring on a financial collapse. Think of it as a financial COVID. And their original plan was to bring it on after the electorate had been damaged, the business had been damaged. They had these 5 years of utter chaos that they controlled with their people in place, and take the whole thing off the rails. It'd be like the coup de grace of control into the world, because they don't care about money, they don't care about people, they care about themselves. And what Trump is going to do, his actions into the financial world are a variation of warp speed. They want to bring down the bond market and cause collapse out through the rest of the economies. He'll bring it down first. Okay, give us the vaccine. And that will put chaos into their planned way of taking over the financials, at the same time that we're exposing what was done with the elections and the tie of COVID into the elections, stolen elections. Because again, as I've told your audience previously, Trump intends that at the end of his time in public life, when he leaves this world, he will be remembered for two things: bringing back honest elections and honest money, not just to America, but to the world. That's why he has to do it the way he's going to do it, and in the context of prayerfully before God. And think about this last thing I'll say. Sorry to just run on, John, but I just want to get this one point in. President Trump, especially after the Butler incident, but all along in here, has believed, and he said it in the inauguration here in 2025, that he believes he's here by the hand of God. God governs in the affairs of men. That's this scriptural thing that's all through the Bible. And so what he's called for is on May 17th, a national assembly in the um, uh, Washington, D.C. Area along the pool and all that. And in this national assembly, to rededicate America to God's service, to renounce the works of the devil, to, like married couples renew their vows at times, a recovenant, not just to the Constitution, although that's the obvious thing because we're in this 250th anniversary year, but in the way that the Pilgrims did, who made a covenant with God Almighty before they even got off the Mayflower and came ashore. They wouldn't come ashore till they'd made a covenant with God. Here's what we'll do. God, will you do this for us? And so recovenanting with God for the protection to move forward. And part of the reason why that's so important is because he knows what he wants to do in the remainder of this year and in the aftermath of our July 250th anniversary. He waited to put the flags up and the security fencing at the White House till after the 250th anniversary of the Army. I believe he intends to wait till after we've completed our national celebration and our fifth Jubilee year as a nation, 5 times 50, and then start the press forward, the move forward to then recapture control of the country to a godly people and not to the monsters who currently hold the reins.
I want to thank you very much, Juan, as we wind this down, for framing and phrasing your narratives on these extraordinary issues of the day. And I think you've laid it down really well for those with ears to listen very closely. And I want to just wrap it up, to pedal back a bit. In conclusion, my final question is, you talked about the bonds coming full circle. Do you have concerns about real estate correction and stock corrections in addition to the bond disaster that's looming?
Well, real estate is tied to the bonds in several ways. The taxes go up. Imagine what happened in Colorado and in Oklahoma, or should happen or will happen. If your property taxes went up 40%, and you know that they intend to raise the property taxes significantly more again because that wasn't enough in Colorado or in Oklahoma or in Los Angeles or any other state or city. Will you be willing to go buy property? Would you be better off renting? Will you buy as big a piece of property as you were planning? And at the same time, we're in some kind of a crisis economically. While Trump is putting the tariffs up and preparing to bring jobs home to America, it hasn't quite happened yet. There's a leg in there that the other foot hasn't quite fallen. And there's all sorts of crises. So personally, and in looking at this with a number of the people who are pretty good experts, I think we have a significant drop in property prices coming shortly. And if you use 2008, 2007 and 8 as a marker, when energy prices went up radically, it triggered a property crisis, builders crisis, valuation crisis, because people's spendable income went down. As soon as the spendable income goes down, the bank's figures that they can, loan on go down. And once you have more property available than you have buyers, on the upside, it's about a 5% window. If you have more buyers than you have property, prices continue to increase. And the banks drive that by having loose loan practices. When the banks tighten up, then the property values start leveling off or going down. If you have 5% less buyers than you have properties available. Properties don't go down in value 5 or 10%. The floor comes out from underneath them. The builders build their properties based on a certain return they expect to get based on where prices are going. And I've been through this about 5 times in my lifetime. Peak to trough, low side, a soft fall is 20-25% in property values. A hard fall is a 40% drop. This one, and the people doing it aren't just crying wolf and Chicken Little and all that sort of thing. There's a number of experts say this one could be a 60% drop. It's hard to even comprehend that kind of a drop. But then again, if you were in Phoenix or Las Vegas during any of these property crises, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Huge development stopped midstream. And in the case of Arizona, they just burned down whole tracts of incomplete property for movie sets. Just burned them up as sets. Go look at, not Die Hard, but the one with Gibson there. So Mel's one. You know, this is the kind of thing that's almost biblical in proportion. So a wise man sees trouble and gets out of the way. Some of the really great investment advisors, Kiyosaki, ask him what he thinks. He has been saying for a year and a half, you're an idiot if you go buy any property right now. You're looking at a complete disaster ahead. He's not buying anything because there's going to be a great time to buy property coming out ahead. But what are you going to buy it with? Cheap dollars that nobody wants? You're going to buy it with something that has tangible value. If you've got silver and gold, you may be able to buy some things at radically different prices than you dreamed in your lifetime. So now's the time. There's moments when the music stops. You got to get a chair. What's your chair? Something with real value. It doesn't have to be silver or gold. You know, maybe you're a farmer and you get tractors at, 30, 40 cents on the dollar, or other equipment that you need. Maybe there's other stuff that we haven't thought of that's worthwhile. Okay, and the one thing I want to make sure that everybody understands this. This is not Armageddon. This isn't the end of the world. You're not having to store up with food and supplies for 5 years for your family in your hellhole. We're talking about a hard hiccup in the way things are going, and where President Trump and the team behind him understand you cannot drop the hull speed of the ship of state of America below a certain number and stay functional, or these other ships of state that are our friends around the world. Pirates have taken control of the ship of state. The pirates are actually insane. They actually are mad with power, mad with greed. They are sold out to outer space, and they have an attitude of, if I don't get mine, nobody gets it. I got mine, too bad about you. They don't intend to let anybody else survive except themselves and their tight crew that protect them, family, etc. With that in mind, we're engaging those people, and it will be a wipeout for them, not us. This is pretty methodical, but it is, it's a battle at sea. We're going to open up cannons. They're going to open up cannons, and it's going to be, one heck of a firestorm for a bit. I have every confidence personally that not only are we going to survive this, we're going to flourish in the aftermath as we throw these bonds off as Gulliver, we stand up again. and that we've actually got a pretty good plan moving forward. But as President Trump has appropriately done, you better be praying, okay? Hand to God moment. That's what that period, that pause, if you will, is from May 17th to July 4th. Deep breath, align yourself, get on God's side on this thing, pray yourself into it, and then be ready for the fireworks, because it's going to be epic, and it's going to be spectacular as we take these monsters into custody, take them off the streets, take them out of power, and make spectacles of them, not just for the sake of drama, but as a signpost in the history of the world that this cannot be allowed to happen. This can't happen again, and to make a spectacle of them that helps to ward off anybody wanting to do it again in the future. And also as a training moment for the kids growing up today, that they see what is possible and they do not fall into these traps readily out into the future.
Well, the power of that prayer collectively on May 17th is going to tip the scales in this universe in a very big way. I've got to get you on the record, and if you can close us out in the next couple of minutes here. Stocks, while I understand that in the golden age, when we get on the other side of everything we've been discussing, we're going to have tremendous opportunities in the stock market. During this transition, do you have any concerns as you played out for real estate and bonds? Where do you stand on stocks?
Well, again, I think that, a lot of the stock values are tied to real estate. And in that hiccup, whether it's an airline or a car manufacturer, are you selling as much as you were before? And you have to reconstitute what you're going to take for payment. I think it's a pretty tough season that doesn't end quickly. In fact, some of the dramas, in order to clear certain risks that are ahead for us, there's going to be a EBS, emergency broadcast system, needing to be used. There's a near-death experience, Cuban Missile Crisis type of event. We have some big dramas ahead because the black hats are up against the wall and they've got to pull everything out that they have. But we've anticipated those things. They're not end of the world events because we're not going to let it develop to that point. We're switching our stance, repositioning ourselves to survive this and to flourish on the far side of it. Doesn't mean there's not trauma. And so I think there's, some risk over there in the stock market, because even if you see the stock market go up, what are you getting paid in? What if the dollar value goes down 50%? Does the stock market go up to 100,000? Okay, it's a wash, and then you got to pay taxes on it if we haven't ended the income tax before then. It represents real tangibles. So it may not be as simple as just saying generically the stock market, but there's certain stocks that are going to be more at risk than others. And that's where I'd have to re-examine it, and think about it, maybe get some good advice, because there was one class of stocks that remained strong throughout the crash of 29 and through the 30s. And that was mining stocks. And, mining stocks are always risky. It's as good as the management team that's running it oftentimes. And you can have rackets in the mining stocks. So, you kind of want to think through what you're doing there and who you're doing it with. But there's some great mining stocks out there that I think are going to do fantastically. And I wouldn't put all my eggs in one basket. Understanding the risks. If you're a person of means, this is a time to prayerfully consider your next moves and be careful which guru you decide to rely on. I would be very hesitant, you know, to rely on just one guru. This is a moment where you need some divine insight and spread things a little bit and keep your own counsel. One of the things that is within um, as a practice, and it's identified in the Talmud for many of the Jewish families, they do not ever let anyone, even family members, know how much they're actually worth. They may, if there's a business deal and they have to do some disclosure, they isolate, they don't give everything out to everybody. This is one of those moments where whatever you do, I wouldn't telegraph it far and wide. I wouldn't even have, you know, the broad family know it. This is the moment to suck it in, and fewer people know everything you got going, and then, you know, spread it out a bit and ask for divine counsel. You know, if you've been given much, to him whom much is given, much will be expected. So you're survived to this point, you're in fairly good shape. It's the responsibility of us as good, faithful Americans to stay viable, have some resources to reinvest to keep America going on the far side of these crises, and you'll do very well. I'm not pessimistic. I'm optimistic and anxious to get back in a world where we're going to the moon and building a moon base and building technology to fill that out. And we're getting clear signs of where the country intends to go. And the education system tied to these fraudulent bonds, maybe that system is going to be a service to reconsider what's going on there and the racket that's there, and move into more private schools. May not be what a lot of teachers want to hear or school superintendents, but when you hear the numbers that have been done in the name of the children to bring America to the brink of utter total financial destruction just based on school bonds, I'm very serious. Once you realize the numbers, it's stunning that this was ever allowed to be pulled off against the American people. It's just, it's stunning. And then last thing I'll say, probably the day after you put this out, sometime Thursday, I just did a private bond conference. You know, I covered it all myself because I wanted to, I didn't want anybody spending stuff coming out there that, you know, we were testing to see if we had enough on the bond stuff, enough of the experts, and we were right on this. Out in Vegas at the Ahern. We just scheduled and did the contract with the Ahern for another conference. This one open to the public. The other one was totally private. I only wanted certain people there. I had about 100 people there. This one's open to the public. It's going to be June 15th to the 17th. And I believe we'll announce it first over at Matt and Warren's show, my chief staff, Matt Meck, sometime on Thursday. And it will be open to the public, and it's Fraud Fighter Summit. And I was going to call it Bond Gate 2, but there's so many subjects here. There's so many different types of fraud that we're facing into the electorate, and such great voices to come and present stuff. And we've already got verbal commitments from a number of just the greatest folks in this, you know, patriot movement that have real expertise, not just cheerleaders. I mean, people that are actually doing the physical work. And we'll announce that over time, but there's only 500 slots there, so they'll go very quickly, and we're charging a nominal amount for it. So if you have, you know, those are weekdays, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. If you have the ability to attend, I think it'll be one of the great events that is done, and very different from all the other ones up to this point in time. So you may want to consider that. I'm sure it'll sell out very, very quickly.
I bet it will. Thank you for all that work and such something so important. My final question, Juan, thank you very much for your time.
Yeah.
Gold and silver. You touched on earlier in this discussion, about the paper manipulation and the banks are running out of time and so forth, manipulating all kinds of things, but certainly gold and namely silver. Where do you stand today in terms of your forecasts on both gold and silver price point, the tangible, in 2026 and beyond?
Well, I've been pretty right out there on the numbers and talk to your audience. The folks that I talk to within the industrial side of the use of silver, their pain point comes at about 280, and then it begins to be more and more difficult. The amount of silver that's actually used per saleable computer chip, etc., is a little bit lower. And remember, we haven't actually got the manufacturing up and rolling here in the country. So they're pre-buying, pre-loading while silver is low, physical inventory so that they can use it. The demand for silver as America turns back on industrially is going to be absolutely phenomenal. And there's nowhere, not even a beginning point of new silver being minted or mined to fill the need here domestically. Remember, Trump's put a 50% tariff on a lot of the places, including China. If you wanted to buy silver, you're not paying market, this paper price. You're paying 50% more as a tariff unless you're getting it here domestically. Well, silver mines haven't been turned on here domestically yet. So there's a gap from when demand's going to come on hard and strong, and the mining is able to supply that need. From the mining side, they're hesitant to commit the resources, the energy, the personnel to bring on these mines. There's only a handful of mines that can be turned back on. A lot of them, you have to go start a whole new mine, and that process is very energy and monetarily expensive. And so they're not convinced, these aren't necessarily mega patriot, Trump lovers, etc. Their concern is a valid concern. If they commit the monies to turn on silver mining here in the country, and then Trump's gone in 3 years, will the next administration be supportive of their mining, both with tax breaks, keeping the tariffs up, etc., and until they can actually start turning a profit, because they have to make huge investments to get production up enough that it's worthwhile on the return to keep going. And they have to get investors to spend money with them to turn on the mining processes. Be 5, even 10 years before they pull the first, quantities of silver. You got to get heavy equipment and stuff. You got to train crews. Right now, you don't even have enough kids sufficiently trained to go and do the mining stuff. By the way, they just had a miners competition the other day in Arizona that I would have loved to have gone to last week in Scottsdale. If you have sons, daughters that are high school, early college, this is the moment to have them seriously consider going into schooling related to mining. I'm very serious. Think about that again. It's building towards the future. And there's all sorts of skill sets involved in there. And then if they want to really think out there, within the next very short period of years, arguably as short as 15, probably more like 20, 25, 30. But within the working lifetime of many of these kids, you'll be doing some mining on the moon. You'll be doing mining of asteroids. If you have those skill sets, but you want to think out of the box, there's all sorts of wild angles that are very interesting and will have tremendous rates of return on your education dollar. Think about it. Could be fun.
Interesting. Yeah, you bet.
So we have a bright future ahead. We have a pinch moment that we have to get through, and we are going to get through it, and it's going to be amazing. If you're planning to survive this, you're going to have something amazing. And so don't let, these, Debbie Downers scare the crap out of you.
They're out there.
The moment is about opportunity. At the same time, there's risk. Plan to make it through and to minimize your risk and to be able to capitalize on the opportunities they had. And by the way, with gold and silver, it's not that you hold them forever. You have them for a period of time till things turn back on, and then you have something of real substance, real value to trade back into the system where things are turning on and coming back on. That's what this is really about. It's a brief moment, but a lot of people, all their dominoes are going to fall down in that hiccup. If you've got something solid, you'll survive the hiccup and flourish.
You bet. Thank you so much, Juan O Savin. Please visit allpatriots.gumroad.com. It's up on the screen. And, of course, thejennifermack.com to get plugged into Juan and Jennifer's world. We can't thank you enough, Juan. Very inspirational.
Oh, by the way, John, there's Jen has something that she's going to release on her site, I think about Wednesday or Thursday. So about this show comes out, she's got a new coin, and it's pretty cool, and she's got a pretty special deal on that. So anyway, but that's her thing over at thejennifermack.com. So you might want to go take a look at it. I won't say any more.
Nhưng ta cảm thấy không chỉ có vậy, có cái gì chúng ta có thể làm được sao? Hồi Miễn dừng lại, hai người trầm mặc một lúc lâu. Sau đó, Hồi Miễn mới lên tiếng lần nữa. Dao long dù trong thế giới này chỉ là truyền thuyết, nhưng vẫn có những câu chuyện nói về việc bắt hổ giết dao, vân vân. Nghe thì có vẻ như dao long là một loại mãnh thú dưới nước, nhưng ngươi và ta đều có thể rõ ràng rằng chân chính dao long là dạng gì. Dù nơi đây có thể khác thường, có thể là ma cảnh bên ngoài, nhưng nó cũng không đơn giản như vậy. Hồi Miễn nghĩ đến trước đây cùng tiên sinh trong bức họa cảnh. Lúc đó chờ đợi bên dưới lại có tuyết mãng đi qua băng tuyết, quả thật rất khó giải quyết. Không biết dao long ở đây có quá nhiều thiện lương không? Đồ giao doanh hay là những người dân xung quanh có thể khuyên bảo thì cứ khuyên, đừng để họ phải chết ở đây. Giang Lam cũng ngồi trên mặt đất, cầm một cái bánh bao ăn. Đồ giao doanh có lẽ không thể khuyên được, nếu họ muốn đi cũng chẳng thể đi, bọn họ có thể bị xử lý như kẻ đào ngũ. Còn trong thành này, người dân lại có thể nghĩ ra cách. Ai, người nói xem, lão Dịch có thể ở trong đại doanh đồ giao không? Tiên sinh có hay không? Thì không rõ, nhưng những người trong ma cảnh kia chắc chắn là có người ở đó. À, đúng rồi, trong thành này ngươi đã tán ai chưa? Hay còn có thể tán ai được nữa? Chỉ là đổi chỗ mà thôi. Ta đi mài một ít đồ trong nhà của mấy ông già, rồi bảo họ làm việc thiện tích đức, sau đó lên Cao Sơn mướn người dựng lều, trả công ăn uống. Kiểu này dân chúng sẽ đi qua nhiều, còn người dân bình thường cũng sẽ đi không ít, nhưng chắc chắn vẫn có người ở lại. Hay cứu được bao nhiêu thì cứu bấy nhiêu. Ngươi đâu phải Long Vương thần thông quảng đại, ta cũng không có pháp lực. Cả hai người thở dài. Mặc dù họ đã tỉnh táo lại, nhưng vẫn không thể không nhớ đến ma cảnh, bởi vì họ đều đã trải qua ma cảnh và ký ức về những ngày đó rất rõ ràng. Trước kia sống lâu trong ma cảnh như vậy, giờ đây mọi thứ đều hiện rõ trong tâm trí họ. Mỗi ngọn cỏ, mỗi cây, những nhân vật, hàng xóm và thân quyến, tất cả đều sống động chân thực, mang theo những cảm xúc vui buồn không thể quên. Chắc cũng không phải là không có biện pháp. Hồi Miễn nghi hoặc nhìn về phía Giang Lam, người sau nghĩ một lúc rồi nói: người biết hiện nay quốc sư là ai không? Nghe nói hình như gọi là Linh Đài Trần Nhân. Giang Lam gật đầu, đúng vậy, là như vậy. Nhưng ta biết một chút thêm. Nhà ta nghe nói trước đây có một người ở thành Thuận Lợi từng mở qua một cửa hàng mộc gió qua. Quốc sư thật ra có một đạo hiệu gọi là Thanh Linh. Thanh Linh Hôi Miễn kinh ngạc kêu lên. Giang Lang chỉ khẽ gật đầu. Không sai, năm đó ta cùng lão Dịch vào ma cảnh, Trương Lương Hỉ tìm kiếm linh đài phương thốn ở trên núi. Vận khí ta không tốt, đầu thai thành cá, nhưng lão Dịch là đạo nhân, đạo hiệu là Thanh Tâm, mà sư đệ của hắn chính là Thanh Linh. Hôi Miễn lập tức kích động. Vậy nếu đúng là Thanh Linh, thì đi tìm quốc sư giúp đỡ, tuyệt đối rất có triển vọng. Chỉ sợ không kịp rồi. Dù có kịp thì phải làm sao? Mặc dù thời gian gấp rút, mọi người đều tin là có thể cứu giúp, nhưng lệnh truyền đi lại phải mất thời gian rất lâu. Huống hồ còn phải làm gì nữa đây? Đối với Hồi Miễn và Giang Lang, vận mệnh thực ra không dễ dàng. Bất kỳ hành động nào cũng có thể dẫn đến kết quả không tốt, trừ khi tìm được tiên sinh. Ai? Trước mắt chỉ có thể làm những việc có khả năng thôi. Hai người trao đổi một lúc, sau đó rất nhanh bắt tay vào chuẩn bị hành động. Tại các doanh trại đồ dao, để đối phó với loài dao long ác thú, do không có kinh nghiệm, họ bắt buộc phải huấn luyện một cách nghiêm khắc, dựa theo yêu cầu huấn luyện của triều đình đối với tinh binh. Rất nhiều nhân tài và dị sĩ đã cùng nhau thương lượng và đưa ra các phương pháp huấn luyện, đặc biệt là các phương pháp được truyền lại từ triều đình, như ném ngư xoa, đập cự thạch, thiết lập câu quan và cạm bẫy, tất cả đều được chấp nhận. Tất nhiên, Dịch Thư Nguyên cũng đã đề xuất trấn giao kiếm trận, nhưng phương pháp này quá kỳ quái nên hầu hết các doanh trại đồ dao không coi trọng. Chỉ có một số ít như Nam Hải Long, quân Vu Dận mới có ý định thử. Vu Dận tinh thông thủy mạch, tuy phương pháp trấn giao kiếm có vẻ hoang đường, nhưng ông cảm thấy miêu tả về thủy mạch, thủy thế và dòng chảy trong đó rất chi tiết và hợp lý, chắc chắn có ẩn ý sâu xa. Ở khu vực Thập Phương Trấn, vốn là vùng đất hoang, Phong Diễn cùng những người dân như Hán Tử với sức lực phi thường đã cầm cuốc chìm khai phá đất đai. Tất cả mọi người đều làm việc hết sức hăng say. Họ đang mở một con mương thủy đạo, và có người dùng sắt đục đá trên núi để thiết lập cạm bẫy, chuẩn bị cho một trận chiến sinh tử với ác dao. Tại khu vực Tây Hải Long quân cận phù, những binh sĩ tại đồ giao doanh đang huấn luyện ném ngư xoa. Có người ném trúng, có người ném lệch. Đột nhiên, một cơn gió đen mạnh mẽ thổi qua, một thanh ngư xoa vọt tới như tia chớp. Oanh! Một tiếng nổ lớn vang lên, ngư xoa trực tiếp đâm gãy tấm gỗ ngầm bắn làm hai. Tất cả mọi người, từ những người huấn luyện ném ngư xoa đến binh sĩ gần đó, đều nhìn về phía phát ra cú ném đó, Người ném ngư xoa cách bia ngắm ít nhất 30 trượng là một người đàn ông lực lưỡng, thân hình trần truồng, cơ bắp cuồn cuộn, mồ hôi ướt đẫm, trông như một bức tranh hoàn hảo. Trả lại mạng sống cho gia đình ta. Từ không mặt tại đồ giao doanh, nhưng ở khu vực gần đó, cùng với những người thân và gia đình, đã phải kiên cường chống cự. Nếu không thể chống cự, triều đình cũng sẽ ép buộc họ làm như vậy. Dưới không khí căng thẳng và sôi động, mọi người vừa sợ vừa hận ác dao. Không ai không muốn tiêu diệt hết những con quái thú trong nước này. Lúc này, tại cửa hàng chế tạo binh khí, Dịch Thư Nguyên đã dẫn theo quân sĩ đến ngoài cửa hàng. Lão Thiết Tượng, người đã đợi sẵn từ lâu, vui mừng chạy đến gặp ông. Đạo trưởng, ngài đến rồi sao? 108 chuôi thất tinh thiết kiếm, một thanh không thiếu, đều đã làm tốt. Dịch Thư Nguyên cùng với nhóm quân sĩ đi vào cửa hàng, bên trong treo đầy những thanh thất tinh thiết kiếm. Được, một từ ngắn gọn, nhưng Dịch Thư Nguyên trong lòng lại không khỏi có chút kích động. Những nơi khác hắn không để ý, nhưng nơi này, một hành trình dài mà hắn kiên trì, không chỉ có hy vọng luyện thành đan, mà còn hy vọng cứu được nhiều người. Âm thanh mưa gió không ngừng vang lên. Cửa hàng bên trong, thợ rèn và quân sĩ cùng Dịch Thư Nguyên cũng vô thức nhìn về phía ngoài. Mưa dầm liên miên không dứt. Cả tuần lễ qua, hiếm hoi lắm mới có ánh mặt trời chiếu xuống, ai nấy trong lòng đều cảm thấy nặng nề. Đặc biệt là những nghĩa sĩ đồ dao, họ như thể cảm giác được sự tấn công của ác dao đang ngày càng gần. Hoa lạp lạp lạp. Mưa không lâu sau bắt đầu rơi. Mấy người ngoài xe bò giả vờ như đang kiếm tìm gì đó. Một quân sĩ bất chợt hỏi Dịch Thư Nguyên: đạo trưởng, ngài chắc chắn phương pháp này sẽ có hiệu quả sao? Nếu không có tác dụng thì sao? Dịch Thư Nguyên không hề dừng lại công việc, chỉ cười nhìn quân sĩ đó, hy vọng là có hiệu quả. Nếu không có tác dụng thì cũng chỉ có thể cùng ác dao quyết một trận sống còn thôi. Nhanh lên, làm việc đi, chúng ta còn rất nhiều việc phải làm. Những thanh kiếm này phải treo lên hết, không thể để xảy ra sai sót ở đây. Sau khi gắn xong kiếm, Dịch Thư Nguyên để lại 10 lượng bạc trên bàn lò rèn, rồi nhìn một cái thật lâu vào Lão Thiết Tượng, như muốn nói gì đó nhưng lại thôi, rồi cùng quân sĩ đẩy xe bò rời đi. Trong lúc này, có một học đồ từ bên ngoài đi vào và bị Lão Thiết Tượng nhìn thấy. Sư phụ, con cũng nghĩ đi, trở về. Ngươi làm gì thế? Lũ lụt là điều không thể tránh khỏi. Ác dao trong lũ lụt lại càng tàn bạo, nếu không muốn mất mạng thì hiểu không? Còn không mau làm việc đi. Dịch Thư Nguyên đi qua xe bò bên cạnh, ngẩng đầu nhìn lên bầu trời, mặc cho mưa rơi trên mình. Mỗi lần chớp sáng lên, hắn lại biết rằng lúc đó là thời điểm quan trọng, và những tia lôi đình sẽ thay đổi và báo hiệu những sự biến động trong thiên nhiên. Hoa hầu đã gần đủ rồi, nguyện các vị đạo hữu có thể vượt qua kiếp nạn này. Tại một sườn núi nằm giữa con đường sông, hai bên vách núi đều có quân sĩ đang bận rộn. Một số lính trần mình vùng những cây đại mộc trì mạnh mẽ. Ha, thêm chút sức. Ha, ôi, oanh, an. Dịch Thư Nguyên, vị đạo nhân này lại không tham gia vào việc đóng cọc gỗ, mà đứng nhìn về phía dưới mặt nước. Dòng nước rõ ràng đang dâng cao so với trước. Nhìn qua vách núi, không thấy quá cao, nhưng khoảng cách từ mặt nước lên cũng chỉ khoảng vài chục trượng. Một tên giáo úy quan sát vẻ mặt nghiêm túc của đạo nhân bên cạnh, nhìn một chút sang bên quân sĩ đang kéo xích sắt, rồi lại nhìn về phía dưới mặt nước. Trong lòng hắn vô cùng phức tạp. Đạo trưởng, hy vọng phương pháp của ngài sẽ có tác dụng. Bọn ta chỉ có thể hết sức nỗ lực. Lời của Dịch Thư Nguyên đối với giáo úy như một lời an ủi. Dù sao đây cũng là một lần cược, chẳng có gì phải lo. Sau khi cọc gỗ đã được đóng xong, Dịch Thư Nguyên dùng xích sắt treo lơ lửng thanh thiết kiếm. Thông qua xích sắt, đèn thanh kiếm treo giữa hai sườn núi. Sau khi hoàn tất công việc này, hắn chuẩn bị rời đi, tiếp tục đến nơi khác. Ngoài Dịch Thư Nguyên và 8 tên quân sĩ, những quân sĩ khác trên đỉnh núi vẫn còn đang bận rộn, bởi vì đây không phải chỉ là treo lơ lửng trấn giao kiếm, mà còn phải thiết lập cạm bẫy đá lớn và các xe cảnh sát. Có lẽ trấn giao kiếm chỉ là một phần bổ sung mà thôi. Tuy nhiên, Dịch Thư Nguyên không ngăn cản những người trong đồ giao doanh tiếp tục công việc khác, vì dù sao thì toàn bộ quân đội này đều dựa vào trấn giao kiếm. Điều này là không thể phủ nhận. Mặc dù giáo úy đã đồng ý, nhưng thượng phong lại sẽ không đồng thuận. Dù vậy, qua thời gian dài chung sống, ít nhất đồ giao doanh đã hoàn toàn tin tưởng Dịch Thư Nguyên. Hầu hết đều tán thành rằng vị đạo trưởng này thực sự có năng lực và là một pháp sư chân chính. 108 thanh trấn giao kiếm thật ra không cần phải treo lơ lửng tất cả, vì Dịch Thư Nguyên chỉ tính toán khu vực cần thiết, không cần quá nhiều. Tuy nhiên, ít nhất phải đảm bảo rằng các vị trí treo lơ lửng có thể kết nối với khí mạch. Trong thế giới này, Dịch Thư Nguyên không có năng lực thần thông gì đặc biệt, mà mọi thứ đều dựa vào việc nghiên cứu địa lý, quan sát thực tế và sử dụng toán học của mình để hoàn thành. Dù pháp lực có thể không hoạt động như ở các thế giới khác, nhưng các yếu tố tự nhiên như thủy mạch, địa mạch, khí mạch đều có sự tương thông, mà tất cả đều phụ thuộc vào sơn thủy.